Joining us now to break down the past week is constitutional law expert Paul Lisnek. Paul, thanks so much for talking to us. You know, I have to think that people live very busy lives. They did not sit at home all day today watching this impeachment trial. So I think one point that really stood out that folks may have missed was the question that was posed by two Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. They asked Trump's lawyers to lay out in detail what the former president did to stop the insurrection once the rioters attacked the Capitol. Why is that an important legal question at this point in this trial?
Hey, Marnie. Well, look, it's important because part of whether or not the president who's accused of inciting the insurrection did so was to find out, was there any remorse? Did he, once this insurrection started, take steps to say, we've got to stop this, I've got to get the National Guard there, I've got to have troops there, I've got to take steps. So the question from Collins and Murkowski essentially reaches out to that issue and goes to the president and say, well, tell us what was going on. Now, his team did say, oh, as soon as he heard, he took steps, he was sending out some tweets, but the evidence presented by the impeachment managers just didn't go in that direction. It seemed to suggest, actually, to the contrary, that the president was watching, and actually the first 2 hours really didn't tweet anything that would stop things. There's actually some new information coming out today. We're hearing from some of the networks that when Kevin McCarthy called him, the president, it is reported, did not exactly step in to try and help when he talked to McCarthy either.
There was also a question, Paul, about Senator Tommy Tuberville talking to President Trump about Vice President Pence's whereabouts when the attack was happening. Can you shed some light onto that possible discussion and why Trump's defense team didn't address it?
Yeah, well, so it's sort of interesting because the president was trying to look for Tuberville, but he called Mike Lee instead. So Mike Lee he was with him. So Mike Lee hands Tuberville the phone. And of course, we heard on the first day of the trial where the impeachment managers reported what it is supposedly Mike Lee overheard and said. Lee got up at the end of that day and said, that's not true. That's not what happened. So that goes contested. Impeachment manager Jamie Raskin stood up and said, OK, look, we'll drop that. But there is some reporting coming out today that Mike Lee's office did confirm there was a phone call that was placed, and that Tuberville did take that phone call with. And apparently it was on that phone call that Tuberville said, look, the vice president's been removed from here. I got to go. And so that clearly, if is true, would suggest the president was on notice at that point that the vice president was endangered.
And how does that play into the legal arguments, into this case of impeachment?
Well, because what the tweet that came from the president shortly after that moment in time, when you just look at the timeline, was basically saying Mike Pence didn't come through and didn't have the courage to do what he needed to do. So if the argument is, if the president heard that his vice president was in trouble, and rather than tweeting, this has to stop, we've got to do something about it, instead tweets that Mike Pence didn't come through, it would suggest on behalf of the impeachment managers, the president was more concerned about stopping the count than he was about protecting those people, including his own vice president, who were in danger at the time. That's the argument, and it seems that at least the defense managers kind of sidestepped that point today. There will be closing arguments. We may hear some more time spent on that piece then.
Yeah, big picture here, Paul. The senators did take an oath to be fair and impartial. We were hearing about Mitch McConnell, and he hasn't made up his decision yet. Do you believe that to be true of the senators at this point?
Well, no, there's no fair and impartiality among them, let's be honest. But in fairness, this isn't a criminal trial where jurors have to be fair and impartial. Look, and if you said to me, what proof do you have? 3 of those senators, Lindsey Graham, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, met with the defense team last night to help them prepare. So technically, 3 jurors met with the defense lawyers. That would be called jury tampering if it was in just a regular criminal case. So no, most of these senators have their minds made up. Not all of them do. The impeachment managers are hoping to reach 17. They're not going to reach that number. But what's interesting is McConnell, listen, he's very careful in everything he says. He did let the word get out that he has not made up his mind, and he's not whipping the vote. And what that means is he's going to let senators vote their conscience. He's not going to pressure them. And if it does leak out that McConnell is going to vote to convict, and the very fact that he even this time around at this point says he's not sure, that does give senators a bit more freedom. Because let's remember, in the impeachment a year ago, Marnie, one of the things McConnell said was, this isn't a fair and impartial process. In fact, we're going to do whatever the president's team wants us to do. He didn't say that this time around.
Well, they'll be back at it tomorrow, and we'll be watching. Paul Lisnek, as always, we appreciate your time and your insight.
Always good to be with you. Thank you.